Welcome back to Drive here on KFH Radio, joined by Jack Oliver from Classic Hits KEYN and also by Todd Rundgren, who's had so many classic hits we can't keep track of them all. Todd, you're on tour right now. You'll be in Wichita on September 28th at the Cotillion, still going as strong as ever. I looked at your Wikipedia page, and it may be longer than War and Peace. You've done a lot of things in your career.
I know. I'm afraid to stop. Like a shark. If you stop swimming, you die.
Well, Todd, one of the interesting things, and I was wondering, how did you actually get interested in music to start with when you were young and then diversify to play all these multiple instruments out there? What was the key that kind of got you going?
I guess, my parents recognized a kind of a musical sensibility in me when I was really young. We had a little 45 RPM player, and you could stack a bunch of singles on the spindle. And the records that my parents bought were usually light classics or contemporary classics done by the Boston Pops Orchestra. So there'd be like Chicken Reel and Skater's Waltz and rodeo music and stuff like that, but all played by the orchestra. I used to just sit there for hours, stacking the records up and staring through the colored vinyl that the records were made of. And it was just kind of obvious that I had a fascination with music. And if they would give me an instrument, I would figure out a way to make a sound on it. So I think for me, it was just something I was born with. Not everyone has sort of the ability to listen to music and hear all the component parts that go into a performance, but that always came naturally to me. So I guess that is what makes up a musical mind.
Yeah, I would think it's called being maybe a prodigy, Todd. That would be my assessment of your career. We're talking with Todd Rundgren, who'll be at the Cotillion on September 28th. You started many years ago. One of your earliest hits was "We Gotta Get You a Woman." I loved a lot of your early stuff. You evolved as a musician. How did you come up with that song? What was the genesis of "We Gotta Get You a Woman"? Always been curious about that.
Well, I was living alone in New York City. I had just started working with the Albert Grossman organization, and I was mostly engineering and producing records for his stable of artists as well as other artists. And living alone, a first place of my own in New York City, and I had essentially what they call a floor through in a brownstone. I had the entire floor. There was a back room and a front room, and I took the front room because it was overlooking the street and sunny, and the back room was empty. Then I got my first production opportunity. It was a band from Philadelphia called The American Dream, and they were being managed by a friend of mine named Paul Fishkin. And so when I finished producing the album, Paul came up to New York to sit in an empty office at the Grossman organization and call radio stations, begging them to pick up the record. And I let him essentially move into the back room of my apartment. And so we were two lonely guys on the Lower East Side. We'd go down to St. Mark's Place every night and look at girls and never come home with any. And that's essentially what I wrote the song about.
Well, one of those things when you're a songwriter, and I saw early in your career as you're writing these songs, all of a sudden you got to hear some of the new songs that Laura Nyro was putting out in the 60s, and you worked a way to meet her, and it worked out to be a nice thing meeting Laura Nyro.
Well, it was sort of a bittersweet thing because I was really kind of gaga over Laura Nyro at that point, and I managed to arrange to go to her house for dinner. And we talked, and she made tuna fish casserole, and she sang for me. I was too embarrassed to sing with her. And about a week or two later, she called me and asked me to come over again. And at that point, said she wanted me to be her band leader. But Naz had just gotten our first record made, and I knew that I couldn't leave the band then. So it was a real sort of disappointment for me that I couldn't have done both, but I realized I had to stay committed to the NAS, and that opportunity never happened.
Todd Rundgren with us. How would you define yourself as a musician? Because really, you've done so many different styles. You worked with so many different people in so many different genres, and that's why I used the word prodigy a minute ago. It just seems like you're comfortable really with any style of music, with any group of musical artists. Am I overstating that, or is that fact?
Well, I think much of it comes with the fact that I've produced a variety of artists who express themselves in a whole different range of styles. And every time I do a production with someone else, I sort of learn something. I can't help but absorb something out of the musical interaction. So that in some way has contributed to the range of stuff that I've gotten comfortable doing. I'm also just sort of naturally curious about what's going on in the nether realms of modern music. And so nowadays, if I want to figure out, what I want to do on my next record, I do a lot of research on YouTube. I'll ask like my youngest son who's in his 20s, what are you listening to? What do you think is hip? I'll start with that, and then I'll start clicking on the sidebars, and the next thing you know, I'm 4 or 5 genres away. And through that process, I recognize things that I'd like to learn more about and possibly incorporate into what I'm doing. So it's a pretty active process. It isn't just simply having things accidentally fall into your ear. I actually go out looking for stuff sometimes.
Well, Todd, you have always been experimental in everything you have done. And you keep moving on, of course, into each year, and you do something a little bit differently. I read once where maybe you were thinking about being a computer programmer. Well, you were one of the first people to put together files for music for people to download and put your music on the first like Apple computers out there for people. Was that just because experimental and interest in all the new realms of music out there like you're talking about?
Well, since I was involved in computers fairly early on, I was able to see what might possibly happen when that technology got applied to music and other art forms. So by the time we got to the 90s, I already knew that music was going to wind up on servers. It was just the record labels who didn't, because they were too locked into the idea of music being a commodity, an actual product, as opposed to a service. And that's why the music business has changed so much, because the audience, once they discovered that music could be treated like a service, realized that that's how they preferred to have it delivered. Instead of going to a record store and buying a piece of plastic, you just want to plug in your earbuds and find the song that you want to hear. That whole evolution seemed natural to me, but the record labels were unprepared for it. That's why we don't have a lot of the things in place that are necessary to make sure that everybody involved in the process participates in the way that they used to when music was a product.
Talking with Todd Rundgren, his latest project is called White Night. You teamed up with a variety of collaborators, including Daryl Hall, Robin, Trent Reznor, Joe Walsh. I know you had some experience with Joe Walsh back in Ringo Starr's all-star band back in the day. Talk about the difference those many years make in a guy like not only yourself, but in someone like Joe, who's happens to be a favorite of mine.
Well, Joe, I don't think I'm talking out of school, but Joe used to be a pretty wild and crazy guy. In fact, when I played with him back in 1993, I guess the first time I played with Ringo, he was kind of at his wildest and craziest. And he never failed to deliver on stage, but he was always just barely going off the rails all the time. And what happened is the Eagles decided to reform, and they said, Joe, if you want to join the Eagles again, you have to go to rehab and straighten yourself out. And he's been pretty straight arrow ever since. So that kind of change was radical for, somebody like Joe, but I never went to rehab. I never got so kind of wild and crazy that I had to have an intervention or anything. The way that I've changed is in the 20 years since then has more to do with the way the industry has changed and the fact that the music business is a less dependable source of income. So over the years, I've just been touring more and more. And for instance, this year, I'll probably be home a total of about 4 months out of the year and on the road for 8 months. And in the years that I was doing my own stuff and playing with Ringo as well, I was out as long as 10 months of the year. And I'm trying to find a little equilibrium in there so it's not so radical. But it's the kind of thing, it's not like riding a bicycle. If you stop, it's not easy to start again. So that's one reason why I continue to do it.
Well, Todd, when you're writing songs, some people I have read about where they set down a certain time of the day each day and they sit down and they write and they play and they write. But I read where you don't finish the lyrics of the song until you have everything else done. Then you go back and write lyrics and kind of finish the song that way. Do you get the musical ideas first and then the lyrics come to you later? Or is that just a process that works for you?
Well, I collect fragments of lyrics through the whole process and little things that I think might make good song titles or jumping off points in terms of the lyrics. But I don't spend as much time actually in front of the computer making music as one might think, or even as much as I used to. I've gotten into the habit of consigning most of the work to my subconscious so that when I do sit down to work, it comes out very quickly and almost like automatic writing. And I put off writing the melodies and the lyrics to the songs till the very end because it gives me that much more time to ruminate about what I want the song to be about. And then when the process actually starts, I'm almost not thinking about it. I'm just worried about finding one or two particular words that rhyme well and further the meaning of the lyric. But otherwise, it happens really quickly. It happens in like a half an hour, less than an hour sometimes. I write and sing the whole thing at the very end. I found that as time goes on, I get a much more, satisfying end product because I'm not trying to force it out. It's coming naturally out of my subconscious just because I spent so much time ruminating about it.
What are appetites, Todd? What can people expect at your concert coming up September 28th at the Cotillion? What kind of concert do you put on at this point in your career?
This is I might say, an interstitial kind of tour. I have very formal, high production tours that I do often, and those are difficult and expensive to put on. They're very satisfying from an artistic standpoint, and they help me career-wise because for most people they're memorable and encourages them to continue to come out to the shows. But every once in a while, I don't have anything in particular that I'm promoting, and so I'll do something like, perhaps a fan favorites thing, or something even crazier and more entertaining than that, which is an unpredictable evening. We have a list of about 70 songs. Only maybe a third of them are mine, but I give the band the first song that we're going to play that evening, and then everything else, I just call it out of the air. We don't know which direction the show is going or exactly which songs are going to be in it. So that the one thing the audience can be assured of, they're going to see a show that nobody else has seen or will see during the tour because no two of them are alike.
Before I let you go, I got to ask you about baseball. I know one of your sons played professional baseball. Are you a Phillies fan, being a Philly guy, or are you a baseball guy at all?
Well, I was a baseball guy as long as my son was playing baseball. And then I learned a lot about the game. I learned things that even most fans don't know about the game. And when he was done, although I missed listening to his games, it was something of a relief. And because baseball is such a sort of a meat market thing. If you were to get drafted by the Yankees in the 90s, as a shortstop, thinking that you were ever going to play for the Yankees, well, dream on. Derek Jeter's not giving that job up. So
Probably not.
it's
No.
one of those. Yeah, it's one of those things where you can work your entire career and never make it to the bigs because a vacancy never appears. You know, there's never a space for you to go there. So my son played for 11 years, and then once he was done, I had got used to not listening to his games. I completely lost interest in baseball. But for the fact that his younger brother is a baseball coach and is somewhat successful one, coaching at levels up to college in Ohio, just outside of Cleveland. So baseball is still part of the family life, but only by way of the fact that someone in the family is still involved in baseball some of the time.
Well, as long as you maintain your interest in music, we're all going to be good, Todd. Thanks for your time so much. September 28th, the Cotillion. Get out and see Todd Rundgren. Todd, we'll catch up hopefully another time. Thank you very much.
So I hope so. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.